everyone, welcome back. My name is Yuna and we are here against all odds to do my July wrap up. I'm sure at this point all of you have heard the news about my cat Lucy having her stroke a little over a week ago now. I've posted about it in multiple videos, I've put it in different places, but I just wanted to let you guys know one more time that my posting for this month is going to be all over the place while I am taking care of her. I wasn't even sure that I was going to be able to get this video out, but Lucy has progressed enough in her recovery where she can turn herself over by herself, so I'm not as worried about constantly being near her in case she needs to move or anything like that. So I'm able to carve out some time here and there to do things for myself. Even though I am only a couple feet away from her, I can see her right now. She is right there. She is almost never out of eyesight. I shared what happened with Lucy because I want to give people a heads up in case, filming and recording was unusual for my general cadence, but one of you very kindly asked if there was anything you could do to support Lucy or help, whether that is like supplies or making some sort of donation. And I was so taken aback because that was not at all what I had in mind, and it's just such a generous and kind thing to offer. I'm literally gonna cry. I'm such a huge proponent of communal care and for supporting each other when we can, and yet when such kindness is offered to me, I'm just so taken aback by it, and it's not something I was expecting. So you know who you are. I am so appreciative. That meant a lot to me. It's like the beginning of the video and I'm already crying, but it can be hard. I think people who feel very deeply for their animals will understand, but I think that there is always the chance that when you talk about how much an animal means to you, that people won't really get it. Lucy is not just my pet. She's not just an animal that I own. I hate the phrase, I own an animal. She is a beautiful little soul who I have the absolute privilege of taking care of and shepherding. So I take that very seriously and I love her a lot. So I think that having people respond with an amount of compassion that reflects how much I care about her has just been a great boon. It's meant a lot to me. I can't thank all of you enough for the kind messages, and yeah. My eyeliner, I ruined it. That being said, I really have no expectation of anyone donating anything or anything like that, but if you are so inclined, I'll put my Venmo information in the description, or I'll put the little QR code on the screen. Lucy's initial emergency vet visit and all the testing we did after the MRI, the blood tests, all of that, it came out to just under $9,000, I think, and obviously that was just the initial stage. There's going to be a lot that goes into her follow-up care, and I'm looking at different options for therapy. Luckily, I do have Lucy on insurance, and while it won't at all cover all of that, it will help with a portion of it, which I will take something over nothing. If any of you feel any type of way about Lucy and you have the means and are so inclined, you are again welcome to send some sort of donation and it will all go towards her care. There is absolutely zero pressure. None of you have to do any of that. But yeah, I know that sometimes I see videos or things or stories about animals online, or just people online, and I think to myself oh, I wish there was a way that I could help. I would be happy to send something. So if there is anyone who feels that way with no pressure on my end, please feel free. I would be most grateful. I'll insert a little bit of footage here of Lucy. She has made some progress and is able to sort of balance on her back legs now. She still can't actually stand and she can't walk. She'll try to kind of stand and fall over most of the time, but it is a huge step just to know that she is trying to stand up, and I'm very proud of her. I know that this is already a huge tangent and has nothing to do with the books that I'm going to talk about, but I just want to use this as a moment to advocate for people putting their pets on insurance. If you have the means to do that, it is and can be quite literally a lifesaver if you are in need of a lot of money at once for some sort of emergency treatment or hospitalization. So if you have pets and you haven't looked into insurance, I would highly recommend you do that, because it literally can be a lifesaver. But let's get into what you are actually here for, and that is the books. I read, I think, 15 potentially 16, 15, 14. I don't even know. I'm so unprepared. I'm sorry. I read either 14, 15, or 16 books last month. I will put the number somewhere on the screen or it'll be in the title. But I read a lot of incredible books. I read several books that I was looking forward to for a very long time. So I will go through them. I'm going to try to keep things succinct where I can, or point you to reading vlogs or whatever where you can get more of my thoughts. But I'm going to try to keep this shorter than usual, again, just because I have to get back to Lucy and all the things, but let's see what happens. It is about 1 out of 10 times that I say I'm going to keep things short and brief, and it actually stays short and brief. I'll start with what was a wonderful reread for me, and that was Upstream by Mary Oliver. If you haven't heard me say it before, Mary Oliver is one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite poets and essayists. She wrote this, which is a collection of essays, and they are all centered around observations of nature, of our relationship with nature. This book is, as I remember it, beautiful and wonderful and intimate. There's just this slow, quiet, observant quality to her writing and her life, and she's just so present and so honest and willing to live life in a world that isn't always easy. And I think that you see that in the way that she loves the world and the things around her with an open hand. She understands that there's nothing that you can keep forever. She is going to say goodbye to the things that she finds most beautiful, and I just think that reflects it just so poignantly in her writing. These essays, some of them are scattered, some of them are connected, but we have little moments of her life, we have observations, and a good chunk of the book actually is made up of reflections on some of her favorite authors. I admit I would read this woman's traffic report, so I soaked up every word, but the parts that were the reflections on the authors, like Whitman, like Poe, those are probably my least favorite sections. You know, they're still thoughtful and lovely, but they just didn't hit the same for me as her observations on creatures and nature. I would say that my favorite parts, which will be a surprise to no one, were the parts where she talks about her interactions with foxes, with birds, about the creatures that move through her life and around her. There's this one essay that I really loved that was about a seagull that she finds very badly injured on the beach, and she and her partner care for this bird for a period of time, but the bird does decline over time and does die. And I think that the way that she honors it while it's there and then lets it go when it's time to let it go, I don't know, I just thought there was just like a deep, grounded maturity and love in it. Let me see if I can find a little bit of it. These are going to be disconnected, but I just want to read you a couple of lines where she's talking about the seagull. He was a small life, but elegant, courteous, patient, responsive, as well as very injured. And we were more and more in a difficult place. How do I say it? We grew fond. We grew into that perilous place. We grew fond. We tried to kill him with sleeping pills, but he only slept for a long time, many hours, then woke with his usual brightness. We decided nature knows best and carried him back to the water and let him go, drifting. But he sank, so we waded out and got hold of him, all of us dripping wet as we carried him back inside. He was, of course, a piece of the sky. His eyes said so. This is not fact. This is the other part of knowing something, when there is no proof, but neither is there any way towards disbelief. Imagine lifting the lid from a jar and finding it filled not with darkness, but with light. Bird was like that, startling, elegant, alive. But the day we knew must come did at last, and then the unresponsiveness of his eyes was terrible. It was late February when I came downstairs, as usual, before dawn, then returned upstairs to M. The sweep and play of the morning was just beginning, its tender colors reaching everywhere. The little gull has died, I said to M, as I lifted the shades to the morning light. Just brilliant and so emotional. I would give this book 4 stars. No matter what, Mary Oliver is a 5-star author for me, but because there were parts that I really loved and then the portions of the book that were less impactful for me, I would average it out and say 4.5 stars. But whatever the rating, it's just a fantastic book. I would recommend anything she writes. Like I said, I would read her traffic report. So even if you think that you might not like the parts that are reflections on other authors the way that I did, you can skip around, read the other things. Incredible book. I'm going to talk about the next 3 books together because they are a series, and that is the Wild Robot series. We have the first book, The Wild Robot, the second book, The Wild Robot Escapes, and the third book, The Wild Robot Protects. Pretty sure that I mentioned in my TBR video that I wasn't sure if these were just like interconnected standalones or if they were one whole story. And I would say, having read all of them now, that it is a story throughout, and I would recommend reading it in order. I personally love this series, and the movie that is out covers the first book in the series, and I think that it's a great adaptation. They're definitely different in some ways. They've taken some liberties with characters and their relationships, but I think that it is very much true to the story and the nature of Roz as a character. So I recommend the movie, absolutely. The story itself starts when a robot named Roz washes up on the shores of an island that is uninhabited by humans, but is inhabited by many different species of animals and their little societies. The first book is about Roz learning to live amongst these animals, learning how to communicate with them. In the midst of that, she becomes the adopted mother of a goose named Brightbill, and the story follows her and all of the animals. The second book, I'll keep it as spoiler free as I can, but the second book is about Roz trying to get back to the island after circumstances I won't go into find her elsewhere. And the third book follows Roz as she leaves the island and travels towards this mysterious pollution or threat that is coming from somewhere across the ocean and threatening all of the animals that she cares about. This one is really fun because you go into the ocean, you meet a lot of different deep sea creatures and things like that, and I really enjoyed that. And there are illustrations throughout all three of the books that you can see. Hopefully it's not getting blown out by the camera, but there's just a bunch of different illustrations, and they're super cool. They're scattered throughout the book, so there's just a bunch of different pieces of art that I just think have a lot of character, and I love the aesthetic of the illustrations. This is a middle grade series, and I just think that all three of the books are so charming, and Roz is so lovable. All of the characters are really lovable. Even though this is middle grade, the books do get kind of dark at times, and they don't shy away from showing some of the harsher realities of nature. Like, there is animal death throughout. The books talk about things like purpose, found family, environmental issues, community, responsibility. It is very hard for me to divorce the experience of reading these books from the experience of the movie, which I had already loved, but I will definitely say reading the rest of the series has made me very excited for the future movies to come. The audiobooks for all of these books are so freaking cute. The sound effects, the voices, the accents that they do for the robots and the animals, I just think that they're so charming. But also, if you want to pick up the physical books, like I said, they all have these really adorable illustrations throughout. So if you can, I would suggest doing an immersive read, like do both the physical and the audiobooks, because they both have just their different charms. I would say that this is a 4-star series for me. It's either 4 stars or 4.5 stars across the board, but I just think that it's a really lovely, easy to read middle grade series that still has a lot of heart and very relevant themes that are explored. Next up, I'm gonna talk about a book that got bounced down a few months of TBRs, but I finally got to do my buddy read of Seasons of Glass and Iron by Amal El-Motar with my friend Nina over on Instagram. I had high expectations because I love Amal's writing, and she definitely did not disappoint with this short story collection. There is something just so atmospheric and otherworldly about the worlds that Amal builds in these short stories, and I love how little obligation she seems to feel to explain things like magic systems or mechanics. There is a level of trust that you put into her, and even if things aren't explained, there is still so much emotional resonance that I think exists in a lot of these stories. I don't know, there's just a level of confidence that Amal has as a writer, and I think also by extension a level of confidence that she has in her readers that they don't need over explanation. As in any short story collection, there are ones that I liked more than others. I don't think that there was anything in here that I would consider weak or boring or lackluster, but there were definitely certain stories that stood out to me more. If I had a magic genie, well, if I had an actual magic genie, I would do things like wish for the fall of all empires and the end of capitalism and the restoration of global ecosystems. But after all of that, I would wish for full-length books or series of some of these worlds and stories. Just her way with words, the lyricism, the imagery, the emotion. I'll tell you which ones were some of my favorites, and maybe I'll read you a couple lines from them. I won't go into explaining obviously what every single one of the stories were, but they are all really imaginative and unique. But some of my personal favorites were the titular story, Seasons of Glass and Iron. I really loved the Green Book. I loved And Their Lips Rang with the Sun. And I loved, what else did I love? I loved Florilegia. Am I saying that right? Florilegia, or Some Lies About Flowers. I also liked John Hollowback and The Witch, which I had already read because it was in the back of one of her other books. I also really loved To Follow the Waves. Before I read you some of the lines, I just want to say that one of the things that I loved about this book was one of the overarching principles or themes that emerged, and Amal talks about this in the introduction. She says, I wasn't sure what argument, coherent or otherwise, would emerge from gathering my favorites, and I was curious to see if they'd make a pattern, surface something deep about myself. Mostly what emerged is I love women. I love women talking to each other. I love women reading each other through letters and journals and flowers, offering up the stories of themselves to each other's tender scrutiny. I love women being friends and being lovers in all their shapes across the breadth and depth of their lives. Over and over in these stories, I find myself returning to what Emily Yoshida called the terrifying magic of two women in a room talking and agreeing that there's still so much of it we haven't explored yet. You probably won't be able to see, but I've marked up so much of this book because there's just so many stunning lines, and I'm trying to see if I can find something that I can read to you that will still be beautiful out of context. This is the opening paragraph of a story called A Tale of Ash and Seven Birds. We fall as cinders, scattered on the wind. We fall as leaves, a bruising brightness, land lightly on foreign shores, foreign ports, foreign parts. Our shapes unseamed, our mouths untongued, we swallow our burning into new bodies. We break space around our hearts, keep our memories nestled in the hollows of bones built from the outside in. There is room left over. The shores, ports, parts, they challenge us to battle. We are weary, we surrender. Nations are great magicians. They pull borders out of hats like knots of silk. Here, says the wizard nation, here are the terms of a truce. Be small, be drab, above all be grateful, and we will let you in. We bow our heads and change. Another thing about Amal is that she is very vocally pro-Palestine, and there were a lot of things that were woven throughout this book that made me think of Palestine, like this one. This is a part of a poem called Kar. When I see a boy so small, 6 or 7, outraged, crying, reaching for his dead father, calling, Baba, 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 as if he could wake him, as if the world made sense, as if a single word in any language could hold all this wrecking grief. One of the other things that I love that she explores in these stories, and is a common thread that pops up here and there, is the imagined centrality of English and how there are so many things that the English language is not capable of expressing. People act like if you don't know English then you're stupid, but I think about how there are entire emotions or ways of feeling or interacting with people that don't have a translation in English. Like, I can't actually explain to some people how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking if I can't use Korean, because English is not wide enough to encompass that emotion. And so seeing that kind of woven throughout, and seeing the frustration of how people are expected to know English, I think that was really powerful. So I'm going to read you a little passage from the end of a story called Anabasis. If I could take each of my words and lay them in the snow at our feet, if I could take each of my mouths and eat this distance between us, if I could devour this border, if I could tell it to smile while I broke its teeth, if I could unsheath the sword of my mouth and strike it down, if I could thread the needle of my mouth and stitch good shoes for her baby, if I could cut a path into this country with the sharpness of my tongue, if I could change the world as easily as my mouth. With the whole of my furnace heart I would, but I can't. Instead, I follow her footsteps as if they could lead me outside myself into a country we already share. I'm not going to go through one by one and talk about all of the really cool worlds that exist, but I'll just give a brief overview of a couple. There's one world in which there are dancers who dance and have bells like sewn into their lips, and through their dance and their collective movement they make the sun rise, and every time they speak the bells ring because they're on their lips, and so their every word is music. There's that world. There's another world in which people craft dreams out of precious stones and sell these dreams to people. There is a world in which there's some mysterious person trapped in a book, and other people are reading this book and interacting with this spirit or person. There's just so much that happens in all of these worlds, and they are just so beautiful. And I know I mentioned that Amal is a big supporter of Palestine, but I also just want to read at the very end in her acknowledgments something she says, because I think that this is really powerful. There are people whom I would thank if our friendship had survived their inability to see me as a whole person. I mention this now to say no friendship should survive that. As I write, we are 2 years into witnessing Israel committing genocide against the Palestinian people through manufactured famine and US-funded bombs. Any person or publication refusing, at the barest possible minimum, to acknowledge and condemn this is not one with whom I can feel any bond of fellowship or solidarity. I can only wish them the restoration of their souls and hope to welcome them in time to the work of liberation and the justice of witches. To everyone already there with me, thank you from the deepest parts of my heart. Rating this book is also hard because, like I said, there are stories that I really loved and there are stories that I loved and there are stories that I liked a lot. So I think I will average that out and say that this is 4 stars or maybe like 4.5 stars. Either way, whatever it is, extremely strong. Highly recommend. The next 3 books I am going to try to breeze through as much as possible because I have a whole reading vlog dedicated to the 3 of them, and they are the 3 books I read by Rivers Solomon. I have An Unkindness of Ghosts, which is the first book I read. I have The Deep, which is the second, and then I have Sorrowland, which was the third. If you'd like to be there for my reading experience and to hear all of my extended thoughts as I read all of these books, then definitely check out their reading vlog. I'll have it linked like up in the card and in the description. Again, as I try and keep it brief, I will say that overall, Rivers Solomon is, I think, an astonishing writer who imbues all of their work, as far as I've read so far, with a lot of thematic depth and layered, multifaceted characters. Frequently, these are characters who exist at or beyond the boundaries of what society would deem acceptable or normal. And I think that Rivers Solomon is an author who is really unafraid to write genuinely complicated characters. I said this in the reading vlog, but I feel like the term complex character has lost a bit of its weight. Sometimes people have a nice character who sometimes does a mean thing, or a generally mean character who has a soft side, and that is just like a complex character. I would say that that's like the bare minimum for not having a boring one-note character, is someone with a little bit of depth, but I don't think someone with a little bit of depth is necessarily what I consider a very complex character. But I think that Rivers Solomon does really delve deep into some things that make people very compelling. And Unkindness of Ghosts is the first book I read, and this is a sci-fi story that takes place on a spaceship called the Catilda, which is carrying people from an uninhabitable Earth towards some sort of promised land. The society or the social structure on this ship Catilda reflects antebellum South. It is segregated, there is a lot of exploitation and forced labor. The main character is a neurodivergent black woman. She is a healer named Aster who ends up uncovering a mystery or secret about the ship that could change the trajectory and lives of everyone on board, and we follow her and the people around her as she is moving through this mystery. This is an incredibly self-assured debut novel that has a grasp on what it wants to say, has very unique, compelling characters that I think are important additions to the sci-fi space. I would give this book a hearty 4 stars. The next book is The Deep, which is a beautifully strange and haunting little fantasy novella. This one reminded me sort of tangentially of Pet in the way that it talks about the themes of memory, of trauma, of community, and communal reckoning with dark pasts. It talks also about individual versus communal responsibility. This is about a society of mer people who are called the Wajinru, and they are all descendants of pregnant, enslaved African women who were thrown from slave ships and drowned, and a society emerges from that tragedy. And it is about the main character, Yetu, who is called the Historian, and she is the only one in the society who maintains long-term memory. Because of how traumatic their history and origin is, the vast majority of the Wajinru people have no long-term memory. They have short-term memory only, and the Historian, currently Yetu, is responsible for holding all of the memories of all of the Wajinru, past and present. She has all of their thoughts and memories in her, and it's about her trying to navigate that burden and what it means to hold the sole responsibility with a society like that. I thought this was so beautiful and tragic and haunting. My only real complaint is that I wish it were longer, because I think there were so many very juicy topics and relationships and conflicts that I would have loved to have seen teased out more. But this read sort of like a fairy tale. It definitely had like a fable-ish quality to it, and I would still recommend. I would rate this, I'm still going back and forth, but I think I would rate this 3.75 stars. My personal favorite of the 3 books was the last book that I read, Sorrowland. This is a gothic sci-fi, urban fantasy, horror story. It's a mishmash of everything, but it is a story that follows the main character Vern, who is an intersex black woman with albinism after she escapes a religious cult-like compound. She is pregnant when she escapes, and she gives birth to 2 children, after which her body starts to undergo this strange, bizarre transformation. We follow her as she uncovers different secrets about herself and the community that she came from, and confronts some of the consequences of those secrets. I adore this book. I adored Vern. I loved the exploration of the realm of the other, the monstrous, and the potential power that one can tap into while existing in the realm of the strange, while existing beyond the borders of, again, what society thinks is acceptable or normal. There is such a refusal in this book with its characters, a refusal to apologize for existing, for being difficult, for being feral, for being queer, for wanting things. They just refuse to cow down or to demur to other people or to the sensibilities of society, and I think that there's just like such power to that in this book. I also really love how bold the queer love and lust is. Again, it's so unapologetic and it demands to be seen and to exist, and I just think that this is a brazen, powerful little book. I mean, it's not little, it's a full-length book, but I would highly, highly recommend. I love this. I'm still going back and forth between whether it's 4.5 or 5 stars. I think that I will say 4.5 for now. All 3 of the books that I read by River Solomon were incredible. Do recommend, just depending on what you're looking for at this time. The next book that I read was one that I was looking forward to a whole lot, and that is Honey in the Wound by Ji Young Han. And I think that this is this a debut? I can't remember. I feel like I've been reading a lot of debuts lately, and so everything in my head I just like assume is a debut. I don't know if this is, and it doesn't say on the back. Whatever. It is a book by Ji Young Han, and I went out of my way to get the UK cover of this because I just thought it was so stunning. This is a story that follows a family of Koreans who lived during the horrific and brutal Japanese occupation, and it follows multiple generations with a focus on the women in the family. The women in the family all have different magical powers, and going into it, I didn't know if this was like suggested magical realism or if it was like hard fantasy, and I will say there is like actual magic happening in the book. There is one girl who is able to physically transform into a tiger and live her life as a tiger. There is one woman who is able to compel people to tell her the truth when she speaks to them. And the main character is Youngja. She is the girl that we follow for pretty much all of the book, or most of the book. And her ability is infusing what she cooks with the emotion that she is feeling, which sometimes is a detriment because she might be unhappy and she doesn't want to put that into the food that she is serving, but she can't help it. Now, like I said, we get a few generations before Youngja as context, but the majority of the story follows her until towards the end of the book when we also see other characters. I thought that this was a lovely book that shed light on some of the most horrific experiences that Koreans, particularly Korean women and comfort women, went through during the Japanese occupation. It highlights some of the war crimes and the human rights violations that Japan has over the decades tried to and continues to try to sweep under a Ghibli anime colored rug. And listen, I am a Ghibli anime fan, so don't come for me, but it is just a fact that they have tried to hide some of the darkest parts of their past under a rebranding of their country. I absolutely love that we met a character named Sunhee because that is my mom's name. So I was sitting next to my mom in the waiting room somewhere, and I was reading this book and I came across the name Sunhee, and I was like, Mom, it's your name. And it's just so cool to have that representation. Youngja's power, like I said, is infusing food with emotion, and she ends up getting involved with the Korean resistance to Japanese occupation through her cooking, and the book follows her difficult journey and also extends beyond the Japanese occupation to deal with the very traumatic aftermath of her experiences. I really enjoyed this book, but I did definitely have some notes. I think that the use of the magic was a bit uneven throughout the book. I think the author wasn't very confident in the balance of the historical story that she wanted to highlight and also this cool new magical element that she wanted to integrate and introduce into the story. I think that the priority of the book was telling the story of what Korean women went through during this occupation, and so the magic kind of came and went, it ebbed and flowed. Sometimes the magic seemed really important and core to the plot, and sometimes it forgot that there was magic in the book at all. It wasn't egregious or anything, but I just noticed that that it wasn't very steady or consistent. There are points at which I felt like I don't even know that the magic was really that necessary to the story. I think that the story could have been written in such a way where the magic didn't even have to exist, but I enjoyed the addition. I'm not mad about the magic, I just thought that it was a bit uneven throughout the story. Another thing that I noticed, which wasn't always, but I think that especially towards the end of the book, Youngja felt sometimes like a vessel for the story that the author wanted to tell and a vessel for the history she was trying to highlight, which you would expect in historical fiction with a message. And it is an incredibly important story that I want more people to know about, so I'm not mad, but I think that at certain points the story was prioritized over the individual personhood of Youngja as a character. So the story, I think, was told at the expense of Youngja feeling like a freestanding real human. This wasn't the whole time, but I think especially towards the end, the book shifted from feeling like a fictional story to a narration of what happened, and a narration of some historical events, some political, social shifts that happened in real life and history, and I felt like I was being told rather than experiencing it through Youngja. Especially towards the end of the book, Youngja felt like a stand-in representation for all of these Korean women, which she is meant to be, right? She is supposed to represent the experiences, but I think that the way it was done felt a little clunky towards the end. Again, nothing egregious, nothing that like made me upset, but I did notice. Youngja feeling like a representation might not bother a lot of people, because I think, you know, it is part of the conceit of the book that she is supposed to be a window into the history, but I still want to point it out. I would give this book, I think, a strong 3.75, almost 4 stars. But I think that this is a really important story that I would love for more people to read. So I would say check it out. Just check out the trigger warnings if you are worried. If you know anything about what Korea went through under Japanese rule, or if you know anything about comfort women, then you would probably have an idea of some of the dark contents that exist in this book. But I think it's a beautiful story. Next book I want to talk about is The Death of Vivek OG by Akweke Emezi. Last month I read Pet, and that was my introduction, and I loved it, so I wanted to keep reading, and this one did not disappoint. I read this as a buddy read with a friend over on Instagram. I will show their page right here. This was, I think, a beautiful and emotional story, and is very unsurprisingly about the death of Vivek OG, but also about the life of Vivek. This book takes place in Nigeria, and it is not a spoiler to say that Vivek OG dies. Vivek's body shows up at his family home, where his father Chika and his mother Kavita are, and the story alternates between one timeline, which is Kavita trying to figure out what happened to her child, like what happened to Vivek, and also a timeline that is flashbacks to the past, where we get to see Vivek's life mostly through the eyes of people around him, but also there are bits and pieces that are from Vivek's point of view. One of the other main characters in this book is Vivek's cousin Osita, who is very close with Vivek. They have a very close relationship, and we learn a lot about Vivek through Osita's eyes. This is a beautifully written book, I think, and there were some incredibly lovely lines. I don't think that the prose is ever overly lyrical, but there is a very measured and poetic quality to it. The characters were varied and fascinating. The men in this book pretty much universally pissed me off. Good God, Akweke said, these men, someone come get them. Most of the characters in this book are navigating layers of some sort of deep-rooted prejudice, whether that's homophobia or transphobia, and we see the ways that these layers of bigotry, recognized or not, affect the love and relationship that they have with people around them, and I think that that was really, really powerful. For example, Kavita, who is Vivek's mom, is a mother who is deeply devoted to her child. She loves Vivek, and she is driven nearly to madness trying to figure out what happened after the death. And at the same time, she is someone who has a lot of, like I said, internalized homophobia, and she has a lot of fear about the life that Vivek might lead if people think that he is gay or think that he is queer in some way. And so she does have that fear associated with queerness. I think that the way that Akweke structured the relationships in this book, it was really clever, because they are going to be challenging readers who probably consider themselves very progressive or leftist to still have to examine some of the prejudices that they have within themselves. I'll go more into it in the spoiler section, but I think that there's going to be some stuff in here that makes people who consider themselves pretty progressive uncomfortable. I don't want to accidentally spoil anything, so I'm going to start the spoiler section now. So we learn a couple important facts throughout this book. One is that while there's never a label explicitly applied, Vivek is queer trans femme. He goes between he, him, she, her pronouns and also uses the name Mehdi at points, which is a feminine name. I'll go back and forth between the name and the pronouns, but we find out that that is Vivek and Mehdi's reality, that is their identity. And before her death, we also find out that Mehdi was in a relationship, romantic sexual relationship with her cousin Osita. They're both in love with each other. Vivek Mehdi has grown out her hair and will sometimes dress in feminine clothing when she goes out, and one day she is out while there is a riot or something going on in the marketplace, and Osita goes to find her because he's afraid that people will react to her and attack her or something, and they have this argument about this. And in the middle of this argument, Mehdi accidentally falls and hits her head, and that is what kills her. That is what led to the death of Vivek Oji. She dies in Osita's arms. Osita takes her body back to Mehdi Vivek's house, but he takes off all of the feminine clothing so that no one who looks at the body will know that that's what Vivek was doing, that that's Vivek's identity. Eventually, Vivek's friends do tell Kavita, the mom, about the reality of Mehdi's transness, and she doesn't react well at first. She doesn't believe them and she gets really upset, but eventually she absorbs this information and she changes the headstone at Vivek's grave to include the name Mehdi, signaling that she accepts and still loves her child. I thought the book was powerful in a lot of ways. I think that we look at the stifling nature of love that becomes suffocating, that is made suffocating by fear, like Kavita's or like Osita's, the way that they love Vivek, they love Mehdi, but because of the fear that they have that is born of trans homophobia, they suffocate this beautiful person. There's a lot in here about identity, about selfhood, about acceptance, about found family. And I think that if there's one thing that I struggle with, it's the fact that Kavita never finds out that her child wasn't killed in a hate crime. She suspects that he was killed in some sort of queer hate crime, and I hate that she never finds out that that's not the case, because I feel like it justifies her fear of queerness. It justifies the fear that she had of Vivek living openly in that way. I think that it is still so tragic the way that Vivek died for really, at the end of the day, no reason. And Vivek even says there's a magical realism element to this book where Vivek speaks after his death and is I'm glad that I died in the arms of someone I loved if I had to go. And that's true, but it's still just very tragic. I'll end the spoiler section there. I think overall it was a lovely and strong book, and I would give this 4 stars, 3.75, 4 stars. I think 4. We'll go with 4 for now. The next book that I read I don't have physically. I took it out from the library as an audiobook, and that is System Collapse by Martha Wells. Is that her name? Martha Wells, I think. And this is book 7 in the Murderbot Diaries. If you don't know this series, it's a sci-fi series of mostly novellas and some full-length books that follow the adventures of this introverted, socially awkward security guard robot that is called Sec Unit after it gains sentience and is trying to kind of lay low around humans while accidentally becoming attached to or building relationships with them. This has also been adapted into a TV show with one of the Skarsgård brothers. Is it Alex? I don't remember. One of the Skarsgård brothers is Sec Unit. I started the series last year before this channel, and to be honest, I had fun with the first book. I thought it was, a good time, but the series for me isn't anything that I would write home about or scream about from the rooftops. It's just a fun, easy time, and I generally feel like I use these books kind of as a palate cleanser when I just want something easy to get through between longer reads or something. The last book in this series that I read I think in November of last year, so it's been a while, so I admit it was a little hard for me to get back into it with the audiobook. I couldn't remember who some of the characters were, what some of the relationships were. I still enjoyed Sec Unit's very dry, introverted humor and all of that, but this book wasn't one that I was reading because I wanted to be deeply engaged thematically, or I wanted to be reading critically of the relationship or anything. I wanted a fun, easy read to be a palate cleanser after some of these longer, more mentally rigorous reads. So it was fine. It was a good time. I recommend it if you like sci-fi series and things like that, but it's For me, it did what it needed to do, which was just entertain me for a quick story, and I would give it 3 stars. I know that there are other people out there who really love this series, and so if you're interested, I would say pick it up. It's just, for me, it has a place in my life, and the place is just to be an easy, entertaining read that I don't have to think about too much. So 3 stars. It does what it needs to do. It's enjoyable, and I really like the audiobooks because there is a version of the audiobooks that has a lot of sound effects, so it almost sounds like you're listening to a movie. So if you prefer audiobooks to physical reading, then this might be a good one to check out because they have really cool effects. Alright, I'm losing steam and I have to feed Lucy soon, so I'm going to kind of go through the last of these books a little quickly. But the next book that I read was Luster by Raven Leilani, and is this a debut? Again, I can't remember. Yeah, this is a debut. So this is a debut book by Raven Leilani, and this was a book that I read the premise of and was like, that sounds messy. And indeed, I read the book and it was messy. This book follows a main character who is a young black woman, a struggling artist named Edie, and she ends up in a relationship with an older white man who is in an open marriage with a white woman, and the two of them have adopted a black daughter. And Edie, through the course of some miscommunications / weird interactions, ends up staying with them and acting as a kind of role model or guiding force for their daughter, while also having very complicated relationships with both the husband and the wife. This book has a lot to say about the power dynamics and politics that go into sexual personal relationships between different races, between different ages, between different tax brackets. I think that there were a lot of things being said about different types of relationships that I thought was really intriguing. And Edie is just, she is all over the place. She is a mess of a person, and I loved her for it. One thing that I thought was really fun is that the story takes place in New Jersey and they sort of go through New York. So there are a lot of towns that they talk about that I recognize, that I've been through, that I drive through all the time. There were events that they talk about that I also go to and attend. So it was very fun and immersive for me in that way. I think this book is really funny and it has a lot of kind of like dark comedic commentary on things, but there is also a lot of depth to it and there's a lot of heart, and it does have, I think, a lot to say about things like relationships and power dynamics and identity in a world where there are so many things at play when you are interacting with people. So if you are down for a messy story with messy people and questionable relationships and dynamics, then you might want to pick this up. It's a short book. It's less than 300 pages. It's only 220 pages. The prose is very readable. It is lovely writing. There is a bit of lyricism to it, but I think that it is one of those very bingeable types of stories. I would give this like 3.75 stars. 3.75 stars. I really liked it. Next book that I want to talk about, the second to last book, is Homegoing by Ya Jassi, and this is my second book by Ya Jassi. I had read her other book, Transcendent Kingdom, and I remember saying that I recognized a lot of the importance and depth of that book, but I found that I was not super moved by it personally. I found that I enjoyed Homegoing way more. Homegoing, I think, is pretty extraordinary in terms of what it manages to accomplish in less than 300 pages. This book starts with two half-sisters. We have two half-sisters who diverge in terms of their life path, and we follow 8 generations of their descendants going back and forth and seeing the ways that the initial divergence from the two half-sisters, how that affects everyone's lives going forward. We have one half-sister who in the 18th century Ghana marries an Englishman. She marries a white man and becomes his wife and lives in relative comfort in Ghana, while the other half-sister ends up being enslaved and sent to America on a slave ship, and her descendants live in that context. Basically, like I said, we go back and forth between the two family lines and we jump generations, and each person gets a single chapter. I think it was really incredible to see how Ya was able to create really full, dynamic feeling people with only one chapter per character, right? Each character only gets a single chapter, and of course their stories echo and continue through their descendants, and we see the ways that their choices and their actions and the consequences of their lives echo throughout, but each character does only get one chapter. And yet I don't think that there was a single character that I read that felt flat or uninteresting, or I felt like wasn't developed well. Of course, there's only so much that you can get out of a single chapter, but it truly did feel like these were full, well-rounded, well-written characters. It was heartbreaking to see the ways that different characters and the different sisters and their bloodlines ended up living and the things that they had to struggle through. I don't think that there's anyone that had an easy life, but I think that the different struggles are very unique and very tied to place and time and the context that they grew up in, or the social, political, economic context of each family. And I think one of the things that is really interesting that this book explores is the ways in which African people, different African groups, were complicit in the slave trade, the way that they engaged with the slave trade, and the way that that engagement, again, as Ya explores, echoes through their family lines. Once again, this is a book that is less than 300 pages, and yet you are introduced to the lives of, what is it, 16 or 18 different characters, and I think it's incredible. I think it is a very compassionate and difficult and honest book that is willing to look at the complexities of different people, the way that they might be victims of or contributors to their circumstances, the way that people try to rise above or move through or leave behind the things that they had to grow up with and around. And I don't know, it's just a very beautiful, complex, layered story with many different characters. So I think that if you are interested in family sagas, generational stories, if any of what I said sounds interesting, then definitely give this book a chance, because again, it is quite short. It is less than 300 pages, and I think that it was a beautiful, beautiful story. I would give this 4 stars. The last book that I read in July, I actually ended up finishing in August, but I'm gonna just do it with this wrap up because most of it I read in July, and that is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This is such a cool and unique book with such a unique voice and style, and I think that actually it was interesting reading this coming off of the heels of Homegoing, and I'll explain why. This book follows the interconnected lives of many different Black British women. I think that it's like 10 people, 10, 12, I don't remember how many women it is, but it's a bunch of different women and one non-binary person. And they're related by varying degrees of familiarity. Some of them are related, it's like mother-daughter, some of them are teacher-students, some of them are just like very distantly aware of each other. So they have very different relationships. Through these different people, there is so much that is explored. We look at legacy, we look at family, we look at relationships and identity, we look at queerness, we look at the way that toxic relationships take on many different forms, we look at the way that even people who are minoritized or in minoritized groups still can have a lot of internalized prejudices or bigotry against other people. I think that the web of lives and influence that this book has crafted with all of these different people is so expert, and I think that, like I said, it's interesting reading this off the heels of Homegoing because it's kind of similar in that we have one person per section, so each character in this book gets like a section and we follow their lives for a bit before we jump to another character, which is a bit like how Homegoing goes. But with Homegoing, we have a very linear track. We have 2 people and then we are following their direct descendants for several generations, so we can see kind of a straight line through these characters' lives, whereas with this one, as I mentioned, we have some straight lines, like we have a mother to daughter, but then we have lovers, we have teachers, we have co-workers, and we just have like a big web of lives. And so we see, I think, a broader scope of what Blackness and queerness looks like in this context, whereas with this one we are seeing very much legacy. We are looking at generational trauma, we are looking at the direct results of a family line and the consequences of family decisions and things like that. One of the strongest things about this book for me is how the characters, no one is perfect, everyone is flawed, everyone has some sort of thing that they got to work through, they got some shit they need to pick up and put down and really examine. For example, there are queer people in this book who are transphobic, or we have people who seem very nice in some ways, but actually you look at them and you're like, oh, you're kind of a bigot in this way or that way. Or we have teachers who care about their students but are very, I don't know, like fatphobic or something like that. There's just very complicated people, and there's no person in here who can claim to be perfect. There's no person in this book who can claim to get everything right or to be the most politically correct. On the front of this book, the New Yorker called this a symphony of womanhood, and I think that that is very apt. If I had to use a word or a couple words to describe the the feeling of this book, I would say that it's like an orchestra. It's the way that there's so many different parts that come together to tell a story or to tell some sort of coherent message. Whereas Homegoing, if I had to think of a word, I might use something more like ladder, something that is a bit more linear, something a bit more direct. I don't really think I have a spoiler section for Girl, Woman, Other. It is very hard to have, I think, a spoiler or to talk about this book and its plot because, as I mentioned, there are just different lives and we're getting little vignettes of their lives and seeing the ways that they spread into each other. One thing that I have to talk about is the very cool writing style for this book. It feels, in many ways, I've said this I think about other books, but the way that this book is written almost feels structurally like a long form poem. It's one of those books where you have weird line breaks, sometimes you don't have any punctuation. It's structured at points where it feels like some sort of long poem and doesn't feel like a typical book, and I really appreciated that. I love when books are a little experimental or different in their structure. What would I rate this? I think I would also rate this a very strong 4 stars. I really love this book. I would highly recommend. I feel like I don't hear it get talked about enough. I'm sure that when it won the Booker Prize it probably got a bit of hype, but I feel like nowadays I don't see it get talked about, so I would highly recommend if anyone is interested in reading a Booker Prize and you are interested in reading a book that contains a multitude of lives and stories and you like that kind of setup, try Girl, Woman, Other. Very strong book. Now, as my voice is starting to fail me and my throat is starting to get very sore, we have made it to the end of the books. Again, I don't know how many books that was. Let me count. Alright, so I just counted and it was 14 books that I read last month, and I had a great reading month. There were some incredible books there. I don't think that there was any book that I read that I thought was weak. If I had to pick a weak book based on my lowest rating, it would be System Collapse or Systems Collapse, whatever it was called. And even that, I didn't dislike it. Like I said, I liked the book. It did exactly what I wanted it to do. But overall, I think most of my books were like 4 stars, which is a very strong reading month for me. If you don't know, I almost never give 5 stars. My 5-star ratings are reserved for books that just like really change my life and my soul and my mind and my heart. So a 4-star book is a very, very strong book. It's a book that I loved. So I had a great reading month, which was great because it was leading up to one of the most horrific events in my recent life with Lucy. So the reading month was very kind to me, which I appreciate. As always with my reading wrap-ups, if you have read any of these books and you have thoughts, definitely let me know in the comments whether or not you agree with me. I would love to chat about them. And I want to say that now that we are in August, I mentioned again in a couple videos that I'm not sure if I'm still going on my trip to Morocco at the end of the month. If I do go, I will probably just like announce it somewhere, and if I don't go, I will also let you know, because that'll change some of my reading plans and also my filming and posting plans. So I'll just keep people updated. But as I said in the beginning of the video, I'm not going to cry again, but I appreciate all of the kind messages and the understanding that has been shown to me with everything that has happened with Lucy. I appreciate it very, 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 very much. My animals mean like the absolute world to me. Every animal that I have had the privilege of caring for has been the light of my life. I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to help Lucy get better, and if you're interested in keeping up with the recovery, I've been posting about it a lot on Instagram, so feel free to check that out. If you are interested in supporting me in any way that would help towards funding Lucy's recovery, I put my Venmo. I will link my Pango page in the description, so if you want to buy a book from me, that will obviously be money that I can put towards her care as well. So it is all very much appreciated, and there is absolutely less than zero obligation to do any of that, but if you are so inclined, it means the world. So I have no idea what my next video will be or when it will go up, but until then, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you all the time. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. But I think it's a beautiful story. Next book that I'm going to talk about. Let it go, let it go. I'm one with the wind and sky.